The following is a conversation with Scott Bywater, one of Australia's most in-demand copywriters. Over the past 20 years, Scott has worked with some of the biggest companies in Australia and overseas and trained countless business owners through his courses and masterminds. But Scott's story isn't just about success. From running a hair salon that didn't go as planned to building a thriving email marketing and copywriting business, Scott has turned challenges into opportunities through grit and perseverance. In this episode, we dive into Scott's journey from how he 10x'd his income through copywriting and how he consistently lands high-value retainer clients. We also explore his thoughts on how AI is transforming the industry and his advice on building a thriving freelance copywriting career. Let's get started. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
And we were just talking off camera about where we first met, which I believe was at the beginning of both of our careers, or perhaps you were 1 year ahead of me, back in 2004. Do you remember that first encounter?
Yeah, no, I do. It was at a Mal-Emery event. I think we went and grabbed a bite to eat somewhere with a group of 5 or 10 of us.
This was Sydney, 2004. And yeah, I was just surprised to meet you, like another up and coming copywriter, like both early in our careers. And it's just so awesome. After 20 years, we can actually sit down and have a conversation, and I get to pick your brain for an hour about insights that you have for my audience, which is of course people that want to become freelance copywriters. So I think a good place to start, Scott, is what were you doing before you started freelance copywriting, and how old were you started?
When I started, I was probably about 24. So maybe a few years older. I'd been in the marketing, and I actually started up a marketing consulting business. And then my wife saw this ad for copywriter for Reader's Digest, and I went for that job. And long story short, I didn't get the job. The HR manager didn't really like my background. Let's say we say I was a little bit sporadic at that stage of my life. I didn't get the job, but I did get the confidence, and then I really focused. And what was really interesting, from the moment I focused, my income 10x'd, admittedly from a low base, but it 10x'd and it never went back. So that was also when I learned the power of positioning. And if you hit the right market at the right time, things can really, so that was a big lesson.
What were some of the jobs you had before you went out there and started copywriting?
I started out in sales and marketing. They'd all been sales and marketing jobs, or most of them had been. From quite a young age, like 17, I went straight into door. I got into university, didn't go, because I'd really always wanted to just get out there and life. Even I wanted to leave school when I was like 15, right? So I was very keen to get out there and do things, and wanted to start a business from that age too. So at 17, I got into door-to-door sales. I went to Sydney. I took off. My parents were in Fiji. I jumped on a train, went to Sydney, got a job as a door-to-door salesperson. Quite a life experience in itself. From there, I went back home, and then I got a job as a telemarketer. The interesting thing about telemarketing is it's probably the best way in some ways to get good at copywriting, because in face-to-face sales, you might meet with 4 people a day, right? Whereas when you're in telemarketing, you're talking to lots of people each hour, and you're working out how to pitch it, how to cut through, all of that sort of thing. So you're getting massive practice in a very condensed format. I actually became quite good. I remember traveling from work in Coffs Harbour with a guy called Rae, and he was the best salesperson. I was probably the worst when I started out. And he would just tell me everything that he was doing. I do this, I do that, I'd quiz him. And then as a result of that, I actually became the best salesperson in the office when I came to Sydney. And I was like 17 years old and hungry, out of school. It was amazing for my confidence, right? Because I didn't have that much confidence until then.
Really interesting, just some of the parallels in our journey. I also was eager to leave school because I discovered internet marketing just randomly online through the school computer library. And I was totally seduced into the idea of making money online. I couldn't wait to get out there and do this online marketing thing. I didn't know what copywriting was, but my first few jobs were also door-to-door sales and telemarketing. And I echo what you've said, Scott. Like, it was a huge confidence booster to be able to call a total stranger and make something happen, whether that's setting up an appointment or making a sale or whatever it might be. I was never the top salesman, but I really enjoyed it from like a confidence point of view. So jumping forward, like, how did you get good at copywriting?
So I actually got into copywriting because I went to this Brad Sugar seminar and he said, start a business for free, build it up, sell it. I said, that sounds good. So we started up this hairdressing salon. And so we got this lease. Then we fitted it out on a very much a shoestring, hired hairdressers because we really didn't know anything about hairdressing. But that's where I learned copywriting, because I would run ads to get people in. And we found some ads that had worked and we modeled them and we'd be handing them out, getting people into the salon. It ended up as a bit of a disaster because there were quite a few challenges with that. But we did manage to bring people into the store through copywriting, because there's nothing front facing. Like, you would not know about it. You're not getting walk-in traffic in those sort of situations. And we sold that business, lost a bit of money, but I was confident that I could draw people into that. So then I got a classified ad. It was $18. That's how far I was. I was literally living week to week. Got a classified ad on credit and it was just something like Marketing Genius proven results or something like that. And with my phone number, this was before Google ads. And I get calls and I do business and I managed to make some money. I started doing the cold calling, and the cold call script was actually very good. I started cold calling hairdressing salons. I had 11 meetings and I made 2 sales, and the sales were like for $500. So I thought this isn't working very well, not particularly when you're driving to each meeting, right? It's not a very good hourly rate. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to target people who have Yellow Pages ads, because they've spent money on the Yellow Pages ads and they're quite motivated. So I had 5 meetings and made 3 sales or something. I learned about target marketing and targeting the right people and that sort of thing. And then I actually used their script for a while, and I just call up people with Pages ads, get meetings and get sales. And then eventually I got a client I'd written a Yellow Pages ad for, and he agreed to do 3 days a week. I think it was like $1,000 a week or something at the time that he would pay me. And I really just went in there and did all his copywriting, all his marketing, like being a mini J. Abraham for his company. And he was really happy with that. And that's when I eventually made that move to very specifically going into copywriting.
What an interesting story. And I love the idea of the tenacity you had to go out there and do in-person meetings and call people who are advertising in the Yellow Pages. Such good advice. And I feel like today, with the internet being so prevalent, like a lot of marketing advertising done online, people have lost that connection. Like, people are much more likely to send a cold email versus do a cold call. But in my opinion, if you're willing to pick up the phone and call a business owner and get your foot in the door that way, it's far more effective because so few people are doing it. What's your take on that?
I think that when everyone's zigging, you want to zag, right? I still put quite a lot of content out there, and I'm a big believer in content marketing because it builds trust, right? So then when you meet with someone, you're more likely to make the sale. I guess the bottom line is you've got to work out how you can build trust for someone to give you the sale. So one way you could build trust is you could put content out there. But that's actually how I gained a reputation and generated a lot of business through email marketing. I just started to do daily emails, and that was huge for me. So that's one way you can build trust, and then as a result, get clients out of that. And obviously now with content, I'm just going back to doing more and more content, because I thought to myself over the holidays, I thought it's crazy because as a copywriter, it's so easy to do content. Even if you do video content, there's a lot of work involved. Audio content, there's still a lot of work in post-production, pre-production. all of that sort
Yep.
of thing. Whereas writing, you can actually write something quite quickly. And then you go, if that goes on LinkedIn, it goes on Facebook, goes on Instagram, it could go on Substack, on all of these things. Plus, if you've got an email list, there might be 2,000 people seeing that for maybe 15, 20 minutes of work. And then you do that, let's say it's 2,000 for 20 minutes, you do that every day of the year, you're being exposed to, what's 365 times 2,000? That's 730,000 people that you're getting over a 12-month period from maybe a 15, 20 minutes a day, which is really quite phenomenal, right?
That's really interesting. So if we go back to when you first started your email list, how did you know what to write about? How did you build the list? And who was on your list in the beginning? How did you know what to send? As a beginner, just getting started, what did you do, Scott? And what would you recommend other people who wanted to use email marketing to grow a freelance copywriting business?
So back then, I believe the way I started my list was through Google Ads, which you wouldn't do that today because Google Ads then were like 9 cents a click. And today they're probably $9 a click or something. It's a very different market today as versus back then. But you could test things like Facebook ads. You could have I would probably lead with socials with a call to action to join your list, because if your content is good, you're getting out there seen, and then you can have a call to action where people can join the list. Get my 3-step guide in the comments, and then people can go and download that guide. So what's more, if you're looking to get leads and clients, this is something to remember with email. You generally won't get much of a response. I'll send an email out and you might get 1 or 2 responses. But in reality, when you look at the revenue that comes out of email at the end of the year and the trust that's built, it's massive. So one of the things I would encourage if someone's like an inspiring copywriter is to build that email list up. And if you're on a low budget, everyone can get content there in the marketplace.
I love that approach, and it's different to what a lot of people would recommend, but I know from my experience, it absolutely works. As you're learning, like you're a beginner, you're learning so many new things about copywriting. Just after a short while of learning, you probably know more than a lot of business know about copywriting. So you can share those insights in a little PDF, right? It could be on a specific topic like website copywriting tips, email copywriting tips, whatever you've been learning about. That can be your PDF. And then, like Scott's saying, you can take some of that content either from the PDF itself, maybe a few tips, or from other content you're learning, and you might learn something new. And then you can post that on LinkedIn, on Reddit, on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever, and then direct people back to that free lead magnet, that free guide, capture their name and email address, and then they join your daily or your weekly email newsletter. Does that sound about right in summary of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about, and something like what I started to do, which isn't the most sophisticated system, right? But there's a thing called the reticular activating system, and you'll often hear people in personal development talk about it with goal setting and that sort of thing. But when I decided I wanted to do an email a day, I just started in the notes section of my phone, should I say, I would just have a note section called email ideas. And if I look through it now, I've got just email ideas which I've thought of, and I just write it down. And then every day when I want to write an email, I just go in to the notes section and I pick one of them, I expand on it. And then you might go back afterwards and edit it and tweak it a bit. But you should be able to get something out within the writing part finished within 15 minutes. Plus, the other benefit of writing is it's one of the best ways to learn, because I forget who said it, but one of the best ways to learn is to teach. So
yes,
because you can't teach something, and when you try and teach something, you actually realize what your gaps are, because you go, oh, I don't actually know that, or you expand something, or do you know what I mean? Any reasons to actually write on a daily basis other than just money? There's many benefits of it. And the more widely read you are, like if you're reading stuff, and it doesn't have to be related to copywriting, it can be about anything, you can start to then incorporate that in there, which makes you a far better, far more interesting writer than if your topic is always just about, here's the 3 best types of headlines. But you want to make it interesting. You want to make it like better than going to watch a movie where people are like just hanging on to get your emails. Oh, what's he going to say next? That sort of thing is really what you want to be encouraging.
There's so much value you've just shared. I don't want people to miss this. I want to recap some of those points because that is so true. And both Scott and I, as experienced copywriters, 20 years in the game, know this. So please pay attention to what Scott's saying. Like the very idea as a beginner that you have a goal of, let's say, an email a day that you're sending to a list. It might be small in the beginning. It might be some of your family and friends. It might be a few people that have joined from social media. But the very fact that you're now dedicated or committed to reading and learning more about copywriting and then sharing what you're learning, as Scott said, that is actually the best way of learning anything, is teaching, because you have to first understand what you're about to teach and then be able to communicate it in a way that other people can understand, which in one sense is copywriting. It's sharing and communicating ideas persuasively. But by doing that so consistently, not only are you learning copywriting deeply, but you're practicing writing, which means your confidence, your skills are going to grow. And the third thing you're achieving here is you're building a relationship with an audience who over time are going to be familiar with you, are going to enjoy your writing, and could eventually hire you to write for them because they might really love your writing style and your insights that you're sharing. So that approach is so clever yet so simple. And I really hope that people actually absorb that, because I think that's a great tip.
It's a lot of fun as well, because I've this year decided to do another writing course because I want to really master, do the same thing as I've done on email, but do it on throughout the social. And someone was like, why are you doing a writing course? You of all people, you've been doing it for 20 years. But there's so much to learn in this space. The pen is mightier than the sword, right? Yeah, it can be used to sell, but from a purpose perspective, it can also be used to like change lives. Like you look at everything is based on communication. I think Gary Halbert gave the example, right? If you want to know how powerful communication is, he says, write a hate letter to your mum. How do you think that would impact the relationship? It's just words on a page. It can ruin a relationship. It can enhance a relationship massively. It can totally transform someone's life just through the words you're using on a page. It can inspire. It can do all those sort of things. So in terms of influence, it's just a massive way to make a difference to the planet with your writing skills.
And what I love about what you've said is always learning. Like I have been doing writing courses too. I did a storytelling course last year and it massively improved my writing, even 20 years in the game. But when it comes to storytelling, that's also a really powerful method. Like I live in Thailand and every day there's ideas for stories. And for you watching this, if you think about your day and you have the commitment to either once a day, once a week, come up with a story that you're going to share and somehow relate to teaching a lesson about copywriting, then you'll find there's 10 different story ideas per day. I wrote an email, which was a story about going to get a massage here after a long day and how a group of rowdy tourists walk into the massage shop while I'm, in a very serene state and they're loud and banging around and I shushed them. I did a loud like shh. That became the opening of my email. The subject line was shush, exclamation point. The opening was explaining what I just said, but in a more entertaining way. And then the lesson was how you need to find the right environment to work so you can concentrate and get in flow when it comes to writing. You don't want to be in a noisy place, just like me getting a massage. So that was just a little thing that happened, a little annoying, remarkable thing, which I then wrote an email about. Now, if I was very clever, I could then repurpose that email into a LinkedIn post, an Instagram post. I could make a YouTube video about it. I could repurpose that 10 different ways. And then, of course, tie in my call to action to join my email list or contact me if you want me to write for you. So I love the idea of like a lot of people watching this are creative. That's why they want to write for a living. They probably enjoy storytelling or may have written stories themselves. You can incorporate into that your copy to not only entertain, but engage people as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think that storytelling is really where because everyone's got unique life experiences. So the storytelling with a message, and that's what will get a lot of traction on socials as well. I know I had a post last week, which my most viral post, let's say, for a while, it was all about when I met my wife. We had a 20-year anniversary recently. And when I met her, the summary of the post was, when I met her, she asked me how old I was. And I said, old enough to know that age and wisdom don't go hand in hand, which is all about having the right script at the right time, right? So this is the power of words. And then I eventually didn't know, but we built a connection from there because I was quite young at the time. And then now we've been married for 20 years. So it's leading with a story, and then we're weaving in the actual message. And then if it was a email post, I could then segue in and go, and there's one thing that you must know if you need to do this, and it's revealed in my XYZ program, and go and download it here type of thing.
So starting with a story is a really good technique. And one tip for doing that is when I'm looking at a product or service, or even my own life, if I'm writing a story that's related to a lesson, I think about what is the most interesting thing about this product or service. So I once wrote for Dale Beaumont, who we've both worked with and spoken on his stages. And he was promoting a course it's called Get Published Secrets. It was about how you can write best-selling books. And through interviewing him, he casually dropped that he was dyslexic. And I thought, that's the hook. That's the big idea on what makes this really interesting. How does a dyslexic person write 16 books? I was interested to know. And so when you're looking for stories in your own life or in products and services that you're going to be writing about for clients, ask yourself, what is the most interesting thing about this that I can use as the opener, as the headline, as the idea to truly grab people's interest? Because if it's boring, they're not going to read the rest of the copy.
Yeah, 100%. That reminds me of John Carlton's One-Legged Golfer type story, right? And it's often what someone just casually drops. And you're like, and you just get a sense, and you go, that's it. That's the angle. That's a hook. I had a builder, and they were just casually talking, because I work quite a bit in the construction industry these days. And one of the things that they said, they'd lived on acreage all their life, and 80% of their homes were acreage. Why are you guys not the acreage experts? Why aren't you positioning yourself as the acreage expert? So your client won't even know, you'll see things because you're also outside of the echo chamber. And it's often easier to see things that they can't see. And those sort of little distinctions, it's like when I went from marketing to copywriting, and I did it by luck, right? But it can be done, and all of a sudden I 10x my business. But there's opportunities with the businesses that you work with as a copywriter where you can also help them do that by their positioning or getting the hook right or that sort of thing.
So in the early days, you mentioned you got that first client that was paying you, I think, a retainer. I want to understand more about some of the other clients you had, or the industries where you started out in. How did you go from that first client to the next one, and what kind of industries or businesses were you writing for?
Yeah, so they were like the pest control industry that I work with there. And then when I started to specialize in copywriting, I was somewhat networked with a few people, and I started to get some of the larger direct response players. So I work with Knowledge Source for a decade. It's probably the largest seminar company in Australia. And then I work with most of the people in the property education space, in the direct marketing space, and most of the big names I work with. And then also I was working with all sorts of different businesses through my email list, which wasn't niched as well. Now I do quite a bit in the construction niche. I've done a lot in the health niche. I worked with a client for about 17 years in the natural health space. Yeah, it's been quite broad and different stages where it's focused on different things.
What were some of the strategies that you used to get those clients, like in the early days?
Yeah, so in the early days, like one of them I mentioned earlier was that it was the cold calling. I think I'd still do that. I still think that would work well. So cold calling would be one. Was one that I used. I also use email. They were probably two of the biggest. But I think direct mail is great as well. I did a bit of direct mail. I once sent this. I learned it from Peter's son, actually. I think I might have sent it to, it's only about 10 people, but I did the whole frame. And it was like this newspaper article, and it was future pacing into the future of what their life would be like if they work with me and all that sort of thing. And I sent one of them to Learning Annex in the US, who were a decent sized company at that time. I ended up writing, it was a bit later, they came back to me in Donald Trump's voice. This was before he was president, but for a project. So it's amazing where a direct mail letter can get you.
Wow.
Yeah. If I needed a lot of business today, I would definitely consider direct mail, cold email, all of that sort of thing. I think very powerful.
To make this practical, how would you find, if you're just getting started, how would you know who to send? Like, how would you build a list? Who would you know which companies to approach? And then how would you know what to send them? You talked about the newspaper approach, which, just to break it down for the listener, is you identify a company, you write a fake article in a newspaper template, which I'm sure you can get from Canva or somewhere online. You write a fake story about how this company or this business owners achieved success or had remarkable results after receiving contact from you or working with you as their copywriter, like the future pacing. At least that was my experience. Is that what you did, Scott?
Yeah, essentially, it was all about how their life had changed after 12 months of work. And it was dated, I think, 12 months into the future. So it was like this whole pacing type of concept. Then I might have put a yellow sticky note on it with something on the front, and then you would follow up. I think they reached out to me. The real key with all of it, you're reaching out cold, is making sure that what you do is relevant. So
you've got to research them.
Research them in detail. And the same as if you're doing cold email, you need to show that, hey, it's got to be a big problem. It's got to be something where they go, oh, that's a major problem that I need fixed right now. Let's say when GST came in, and maybe you knew that accountants were struggling to communicate how the changes made to their clients, or you could see that there was a big opportunity going out to clients about GST or something like that, then you could write a little message and go, Jesse, and then something personal that shows you understand them. Are you having a problem with this GST thing? If so, reach out to me, or here's a book or whatever. I think that sort of thing can be quite powerful as well.
It's a really powerful strategy, and I get tons of cold emails from all different service providers, and it's immediately obvious when they've done no research. They're sending the same email not only to me, but to thousands of business owners, and I delete them instantly, never reply to them. The ones I'll entertain and reply to, even if we don't work together, are the ones that show through the first sentence they've taken the time to research and understand me. They know at least a little bit about me. An example would be this podcast episode. If someone watched this and said, hey, Jesse, loved your interview with Scott. I love that part at the 15-minute mark where Scott said this. And I'm just wondering, do you agree with that? If they had a question I could respond to, even out of courtesy, I'll respond. But so few people do that. They'd rather mindlessly blast the same generic, non-personalized message to 10,000 people and then say it doesn't work because they don't get any responses. But it's when you send a handful of emails to people you generally want to work with and you can see a problem you can solve, those people will appreciate that kind of personalized outreach as opposed to some mass generic outreach that rarely gets a good response.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes we think, oh, the more people we post out to, the greater our reach, the better the results we'll get. Let me give you some examples of that. I once did a launch to my email list, and my email list at the time was about 7,000 or 8,000. And we made 42 sales of $1,000 product.
Nice.
And I thought, oh, let's just see where those sales actually came from. So I went through a crunch through the numbers, and it was 80 to 90% of them had come from 180 people who are on a subscription where they were paying about $67 a month. So I got 80 to 90% of my results from 180 people, and I got 10 to 20% of my results from the other 6,800, 7,500, whatever it was, people. And you can see those 180 were like probably over 100 times more valuable. And I go to events now, and I might meet with 8 people in a night, follow them up, and I'll make a couple of sales. So that's far more valuable in some cases than going and presenting at an event. I've spoken at events where you go to 200 people who aren't really qualified and you walk away with nothing. My encouragement is don't necessarily get hung up on the numbers and the reach and all that sort of thing, and really hone on the quality.
And if you know who your niche is, like if you know I'm working in the health niche, I want to work with health coaches or chiropractors or whoever. If you know that, then it's much easier to go find, okay, even Google, what are the must-attend chiropractor events of the year, and get a list somehow of what are the big events or even the small events that are happening, maybe locally or nationally if you have the budget to travel. But certainly locally, can you go to some of those events and just walk around and introduce yourself? I've done that. And like Scott's saying, you don't need to be at an event with thousands of people. Often that's very difficult. But at small, intimate events where you can go around and meet everyone, mention that you're a freelance copywriter who specializes in writing for the health niche, you're going to get clients if you do that in a confident, consistent way. You can literally just go and talk to people, which seems to be a lost art nowadays.
Yeah, I agree completely. Like that talking to people and the network and all that sort of thing is still so powerful. And one thing I would encourage is really invest in your network and in networking as well, as because I came from a very direct response, and it's a real pity it took me so long to actually grasp this, but I came from very much a direct response background. So I was like, everything is direct response, right? It was probably only later in my career that I was sitting in Fiji reading the 80-20 Manager, and he was talking about the power of loose connections. And I started to look at where all my best clients came from. And I'm like, oh, that person came from a referral from that person who connected me with that person. And I joined the dots. It was the first time I joined the dots. And sometimes it was like 5 to 7 connections deep. So I have a chat with Jesse now. Then Jesse connects me with someone. And then that person I become friends with, and they introduce me to someone, and then they introduce me to someone, and then that person becomes a client. This is what it looked like. So very much playing a long game with networking is like super powerful. Whereas before I always looked at networking as go to an event, hand out business cards, follow up, make a sale, which can definitely work as well. But you want to be playing the long game and the short game. And that's probably where a lot of my success also revolves around playing the long game from a networking perspective as well.
Me too. Early in my career, like Scott and I met at an event, and here we are years later talking. The previous guest on the podcast, Alison, I met at an event. We were walking through the favelas on a walking tour in Colombia. I just happened to meet her there, another copywriter, and then we do a podcast. It's the power of, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. How can you meet more people in the industry that you're working in? Because if you're just sitting at home, you're invisible. If you're just sitting at home not doing anything, no one's going to know that you exist, and therefore they can't hire you. They can't work with you. I want to switch gears here, Scott, and talk about the media There's a lot of talk nowadays about how AI is replacing lots of different industries. What do you say to the people out there who say that it's too late to get into copywriting? AI is here, it's replacing everyone.
It's a really good question. I think what AI has done is it basically takes out anyone who's mediocre. So you're not going to hire a mediocre, you know how you used to be able to get like just lots of content done, and you'd go to a content house and they come back and you'd have to fix all the spelling and all that sort of thing. So those things are like gone, right? Because you can get AI to do it. If you are good at and you become really good at what you do, in some ways it's one of the best ways to enter copywriting, because you've got this assistant who can help speed things up. You don't have to sit there and brainstorm 20 subject lines. You just put it into AI and then you go through and you pick the best ones. Like there's some massive time savings. And there's lots of different ways. Brainstorm the fears, the pains, the desires, the beliefs, all of that sort of thing. But if someone's just plugging in and going, hey, write me a sales letter about how to make money in the stock market without any of that data, you're not going to do well. The other thing to factor in, and this is something really to consider, is copyright is minimally about writing. It's not about writing much at all. Yeah, according to Gary Benzavenger, who's arguably the greatest modern day copywriter, it's 40% about research, 40% about writing, 20% about editing. I don't know about you, Jesse, but I tend to spend far more than 20% on the editing side of things. So I would say writing is a tiny fraction of the job of a copywriter. That's what the AI can help you with, but it's not, and it can help you with the research and all that sort of thing, but it's by no means a magic bullet, at least right now.
And there's loads of marketing out there. If you spend any time on social media, you'll see ads saying, one-click AI writer, or this push button writes your whole business plan and all your emails and your sales pages in 2 clicks. And you're like, as someone that knows to write good copy, that's impossible. We're not there yet. Maybe one day in 10 years or so, but we're not there yet. It'd be like saying to Steven Spielberg, oh, there's this great new AI tool. Click a button, it writes a blockbuster movie. He'll laugh in your face because he knows to do that, you need to first have a great idea. You need to research that idea. You need to research that product or service, find the hooks, find the angles. But yeah, it's laughable to think AI is ready to replace us. And what Scott said is very true. Writing is an important part, but it's not the most important. How are you specifically using AI in your business or your copywriting workflow?
Yeah, so I will use it. Headline writing is one that I'll use it for a lot. Not that I even use the headlines in most cases that it gives me, because I've got a lot of experience with split testing headlines. I once worked with a client for about maybe 17 years, and we would split test that an email list of 2 million, and we'd be just writing subject lines for them and seeing the split test results. So headline writing makes it a lot easier to do. The other thing I find is if I've written something and I'm not happy with the hook, I'll say, make this hook better. Act as Gary Benzavenger or act as John Carlton or whatever, and make this hook better. I find it really powerful for that sort of thing. We'll use it for one of the really powerful ways to do it. Let's say a client like says, I like the copy, but it needs to be more upmarket. It's brilliant for that because you can plug it in and say, these are the directions, make it more like this. And that's very powerful. It's also very powerful if you're using transcription software, because you take what the client says when they give feedback, you plug it into the AI and you say, change this copy based on this feedback. And it generally gives a pretty decent result. It's very, very effective. Pains, desires, beliefs. I believe in taking the transcript from the interview. So if I interview a client, I'll upload the transcript into ChatGPT. Then I'll direct ChatGPT, but it's all based on the raw data, not just going directly with, hey, tell me about this type of thing.
And I think one of the most common uses for AI tools like ChatGPT is to summarize long form content. And what Scott's talking about is, if in the beginning stages, if you get a new client and you want to learn about their business, you want to ask them lots of questions like, who's your target audience? What are some of the problems you help them solve? How do you help them solve those problems? All those wonderful research questions. You could do that over audio, a Zoom call, a phone call. You want to make sure you record it and then take that transcript, give it a tool like ChatGPT and say, summarize this transcript into the most important key points, or summarize all of the answers into bullet points, or whatever it might be. So that way you're not having to listen to that 1 hour or 2 hour interview you did with a client. You can just got the cliff notes right there. You can reference them, or even just use those to educate ChatGPT and say, okay, I want you to read and understand this transcript, because in a moment we're going to brainstorm some headlines based on what the client has said in the transcript.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be really good for streamlining things in terms of, you need to work on the prompt stack and all that sort of thing, but for defining things like core story, unique selling proposition, all of that sort of thing, when you ask the right questions, and you can build out those sort of things for clients as well, which are quite powerful.
One question I had for you, Scott, is pricing. A lot of new copywriters don't know what to charge, don't even know where to begin. I've always said you want to come up with your hourly rate, but use that as an internal calculator based on how many hours you think the job will take you. And then maybe add a little bit more, because there's probably going to be revisions, and you also want to calculate, the time it takes to research and write and things like that. But there's so many different models to coming up with a quote that you give to a client when you're pricing a job. What advice do you have for people getting started on what they should charge, or how to even charge for their copywriting?
Yeah, so in terms of pricing, I think I've probably done it in a similar way to you. I tend to work on fixed price models because I think it's simpler. I think the client's happier. It's not going to go up or down or anything like that. I think it's cleaner in terms of a fixed price model. But yeah, you obviously calculate and you're going, how long is this going to take? And then if you can then measure your time each time, you get better and better at that. I have an internal idea of how everything takes, but I should probably measure things a lot better than I actually do. But I think that's probably the best way. Some clients where they want retainers, I'm on a retainer for a specific amount of work done on a monthly basis, which can be good. And that's probably changed my business a fair bit, actually, having more and more retainers and packaging up whole offerings and doing retainers, because it's really nice when you know that you're above break even and profitable at the start of the month, even if you don't make any sales at all for that month. There's a lot of peace of mind in having that there with retainer type of arrangements.
Could you walk me through what a retainer might include? So you get X amount per month, and for that you're delivering what exactly?
Yeah, so it may be, for instance, you're looking up their email list as an example. That might be $3,000 a month to $15,000 a month, depending on what you're actually doing for them. These are all the tasks that you do. And sometimes it might be just sending out everyday emails, and sometimes it might be building out funnels for them, or even writing so many Facebook ads, et cetera, et cetera. It tends to be tailored to the particular client, depending on the size of their list, where they're out of their business, what assets they've already got in place. If you're doing content marketing for a client, it might be anywhere from 1 to 10K a month, depending on the level of service and depth, and if you're going to do video or heaps of content for them, and how many different platforms you're doing content for.
I want to ask the final question, Scott, which is, what advice would you give a new freelance copywriter starting out today?
Such a good question. I'm just reflecting back on myself. If I was starting out back then, what advice would I give if that was today? One is probably consistency with everything that you do. And because you need to build trust, right? That's the most important asset you've got is trust. Trust comes through consistency, and consistency comes through doing things day in, day out, even when nobody's watching, even when there's no rewards, because there generally isn't any rewards in the beginning, right? You know, these people who got these massive followings, there was a time when, you know, nobody cared about them. So that consistency is probably key. I think the other thing is to really get good at sales, number one, because if you get good at sales, probably what made me good at copywriting was that I was already good at sales or decent at sales. Because if you can't sell the job, you're not going to do the copy, and then you'll probably get out of the business. You know, so that's like from a short term. So from a short term perspective, you need to get really good at sales to sell the job, to get the job. I think the other thing is to get really good at networking. Yeah, it's consistency in terms of learning sales. So to spending a bit of time each week on that, consistency in terms of creating content, consistency in terms of networking, and consistency in terms of learning the trade. Like I know there was a period there where every day I'd wake up 6 a.m. and I would rewrite copy. I don't know if I did it for 12 months consistently, but it made a huge difference. I'd rewrite the copy in my own handwriting. So of learning, and when I say learning, not just reading books, but actually actively learning, where you're rewriting it, and then you're thinking, what did I learn from that? So the theme is consistency.
100% agree with that. What a great approach. And you had that drive, I think, from the beginning, knowing I want to do this, and you were committed and you were consistent. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of noise on social media about copywriting being this kind of way to make quick money, and just use AI or do all the writing, go out and get clients, and AI will do the writing, you just be the middleman. I think that those type of copywriters never last and never really produce genuinely great copy. It's more of people bouncing between business ideas or business opportunities. And for me, copywriting is best suited to people that perhaps like you and I, creative, ambitious, they want to make their mark on the world, they want to have impact, they want to communicate. What are some of the qualities you think are suitable for someone becoming a copywriter?
You've got to be very optimistic, right? Because people who aren't optimistic, you do something, it doesn't work, you go, oh, you know, like, how many times have you thought about giving up at some stage in your career if you're a business owner? There's many times when you could have, right? So if you're not optimistic, you're probably not going to make it. So you're going to have that persistence.
Yeah, I think that just speaks to the importance of really getting good at this before you go out there and try and get these big whale clients that you've had and I've had. And if you're a good copywriter, we're so rare. We're as rare as hen's teeth, as some people say. And you hire copywriters. I've hired copywriters. I had an agency for 10 years, and it's very hard to find good copywriters, and clients know that too. So when they find a good one, and a good one is someone that's taken the time to develop the skills to be good, just like anything, it takes time, it takes passion. But once you're there, a client will keep you around for years. You mentioned earlier you had a client for 17 years. That's extraordinary, because obviously you are adding value to that business, and they're rewarding you with money and by being loyal to you as well. The people that pay good money for copy know what good copy looks like. They know what they want. It simply means wherever you're starting out, spend the time to really learn this craft. Practice writing, read all the books, study copywriting, listen to podcasts like this. And it'll be the highest return on investment you'll get is studying and getting good at this craft, because it'll pay off in the future. But if you skip this because you're in a hurry to make a few bucks, you'll never get those big clients. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a great time.
Thanks for having me.